In the winter of 1784, a small surveying party crossed a remote Siberian pass to map an unclaimed valley. The men were experienced, hunters, a priest, and a young clerk used to cold weather and long days on the trail. But the deeper they traveled, the stranger the land became. The wind fell silent. Horses froze at empty ridges, and each morning new heavy prints circled their camp without a single sound in the night. They believed they could finish their work and turn back before winter got worse. They did not realize something in the valley had already taken interest in them. So before we continue, please make sure you leave a like and let us know where you're watching from. Thanks. Snow had already covered the older tracks by the time we reached the upper valley. The drifts came up to the bellies of the horses, and the sled runners scraped over buried stones. Each breath turned to frost on my scarf and eyebrows. The air felt heavy and still without the usual bite of wind that carried sound through those mountains. Our party moved in a narrow line. Anton and I at the front with the lead sled, the horses straining in their harness. Behind us, old Sergei walked beside the second sled, his shoulders wrapped in a patched fur coat. Last came Father Mikhail with his pack, lips moving in quiet prayers that only formed small clouds around his face. Ahead, our guide Dmitri moved with a steady pace that never changed no matter how deep the snow grew. His fur hood hid most of his face, but I still recognized his stiff posture. He had not liked this valley from the moment he heard its name. We had set out from the settlement on the lower river 2 weeks earlier. The governor's clerk had given us the papers with a bored expression, as if he were sending us to inspect a nearby barn. Our task was to record routes through the pass and list resources in the valley: game, timber, or anything the crown might squeeze from this far corner of land. I was the youngest, sent by my uncle who worked in the governor's office, and saw this as a chance for me to earn a position in town. Anton, broad-shouldered and impatient, had joined for the pay and talk of fur-rich slopes. Sergei knew the trade paths of half the province and never turned down coins, even in winter. Father Mikhail claimed a wish to visit the remote families and deliver blessings, though I suspected he also wanted distance from the town's gossip about his past. Only Dmitri had not chosen freely. The governor had called him into the office and told him to guide us or lose his rights to trap near the river next season. We had followed old hunter trails through the first range, stopping at cabins that leaned under thick layers of snow. The people there spoke openly of wolves, storms, and the hazards of thin ice. But when we mentioned the valley beyond the second ridge, their tone changed. Their eyes shifted toward the door and voices dropped. One man pretended not to hear until his wife pressed him. Then he muttered about strange cries and missing hunters. An old woman crossed herself and told us the mountains there did not welcome strangers. When Dmitri heard them, he grew quiet and stared at the floor, though he said nothing against the journey. Later, by the stove in one of the cabins, he told me that the valley had a name in his people's tongue that meant only kept apart. He did not explain further. I did not press him. At that time, I believed most such stories hid simple dangers: thin ridges, hidden crevasses, and animals that stalked the unwary. The higher we climbed, the more that confidence thinned. The snow no longer fell in loose flakes, but in dry grains that stung the skin. Trees grew sparse and twisted, their branches heavy with ice, and their dark trunks broke the white slopes in short, jagged lines. The path narrowed along a steep hillside where the horses slipped and snorted. Once the second sled lurched to one side, and a crate slid off, tumbling down the slope until it vanished in a drift. Sergei swore under his breath and scrambled after it with a rope. But even his curses sounded hushed. No echo answered him from the valley below. It was as if the snow and trees swallowed every sound and held it. We camped that night beneath a rock overhang that gave us a little shelter from the dry snow. Dmitri chose the place without hesitation, pointing to the way the wind had carved the drifts. He said the slope above was stable and that no slide would reach us there. We stamped down a flat space and raised a small canvas tent for the four of us while Dmitri slept near the horses and sleds. The fire burned low and smoky with the poor wood we found, but its warmth still reached our hands. Anton loosened his boots and held his feet toward the flames. His toes were pale, and he flexed them with a grimace. "If we find nothing in that valley," he said, "I will demand double pay for every step. The Crown's mapmakers can draw the rest from behind their desks." "You knew the distance when you signed," Sergei answered, stirring the pot of thin stew with a careful hand. "Cold is the same price we all pay out here." Father Mikhail watched them both, his hands folded over his knees. "Some valleys are not meant to be counted in coins," he said. These people we passed, they fear something here. They fear every shadow, Anton replied. Wolves, spirits, old debts. Give them a chance, and they will blame everything on the land. Men vanish in winter because winter eats them. His words came out sharp, but his eyes flicked toward the mouth of the rock shelter. I noticed that. So did Sergei. He handed Anton a bowl and spoke in a calmer tone. The old stories warn of real dangers. When they say a valley is closed, they may mean the snow hides pits or the wind never rests. We listen and we watch our footing. That is all. I ate in silence, tasting little. The fire's smoke clung to my throat, and the heat reached only the front of my face, leaving the back of my head cold. Outside, the night pressed close. Each time the fire crackled, I glanced toward the dark mouth of the shelter. Only the pale slope showed there, faint in the starlight. No trees, no movement. Still, my skin stayed tense as if waiting for something to break that stillness. Later, when we lay shoulder to shoulder inside the tent, I could not sleep. The canvas shifted gently with each breath of wind. The horses occasionally snorted or stamped outside, their harnesses clinking. I listened to the others, Anton's heavy breathing, Sergei's soft wheezes, the faint murmur of a prayer from the priest. I thought of the settlement we had left, the warm smell of bread and the cluttered office where my uncle had pressed the travel papers into my hand. He had smiled with pride then, confident that I would return with neat notes and careful drawings. I wanted to hold that picture in my mind, but it faded each time the horses grew quiet for too long. Sometime in the night, they fell silent all at once. No creak of harness, no stamp of hooves, no breath that reached us through the canvas. The change woke me more fully than any shout. I lay still, blinking in the dark. The air inside the tent felt thin, as if it waited. I turned my head toward Anton, and saw only the dim outline of his profile. His eyes were open. He had noticed it, too. You hear that? He whispered. I hear nothing, I answered. That is the point, he said. We listened. I could still hear the faint rasp of Sergei's breath, the soft whisper of the canvas along its poles. Beyond that, nothing. No wind, no animal. The valley had emptied of sound. Then, from somewhere above the shelter, there came a single distant call. It did not rise or fall. It stretched for several long heartbeats, steady and deep, until it stopped as suddenly as it had begun. It was not the howl of a wolf. It was not the cry of any bird I knew. The sound carried through the snow and stone with clear strength. Yet, it felt far off, as if it came from a ridge beyond our sight. Anton's hand closed on my sleeve. Elk, he breathed. No elk climbs to this height in winter, came Sergei's voice from the darkness. He was awake as well. That was something else. On the other side of the tent, Father Mikhail crossed himself. The small motion stirred the air. We should not answer it, he said quietly. Whatever calls in a place like this do not seek company. I lay very still and felt my heart beat against the frozen ground beneath our bedding. The sound did not repeat. The horses remained silent. The valley returned to its heavy quiet, but the memory of that call stayed under my skin. In that moment, the stories we had heard in the cabins no longer seemed like distant gossip. They sat in the dark with us, close and real, breathing the same icy air. I woke to a gray light pressing through the canvas and a stiffness in my limbs that went down into my joints. For a moment, I did not remember where we were. The smell of smoke and sweat, the cramped space, the faint crackle of embers outside brought it back all at once. The others were already stirring. Anton shoved the blanket away and rubbed his face with both hands. His eyes were red-rimmed. Did you sleep at all? I asked. Enough to move, he said. Not enough to forget that sound. We stepped out in the morning. Low clouds hung over the ridge, heavy and close. Fine grains of snow drifted through the air, more dust than flakes. The fire burned low in a shallow hollow, its coals still alive under a thin crust of ash. The horses stood near the sleds, heads high, ears forward, backs speckled with fresh frost. Their leads had twisted around the stakes in the night. One of them had broken a strap. The leather hung from the post in two pieces. Dmitri crouched near the nearest horse, examining the ground. He did not turn when we approached. His shoulders were tight, and his gloved hand brushed slowly over the snow. I looked down and saw the marks he traced. The snow near the animals was disturbed in wide patches, but not in the way hooves usually churned it. There were deep depressions spaced in a regular pattern, each longer than my boot, broader toward the front, narrowing slightly at the rear. Melted edges had refrozen into thin rims of ice. What did this do? Anton asked. Dmitri straightened. His face looked drawn, his cheeks hollowed by a night without rest. It circled the camp, he said. He pointed along a faint line of impressions that curved away toward the slope, came close to the horses, did not break the stakes, then moved on. The prints were not shaped like human boots, but they were not the rounded marks of a bear. They had a suggestion of toes at the front, though time and wind had softened the details. Each step sank deep into the packed crust where a man's weight would hardly dent it. Sergei came up behind us and grunted. "A man in wide shoes," he said, though his voice carried little conviction. "We're two men carrying a load." "It walked alone," Dmitri said. "No second line, no dragging between the steps. It stood there." He pointed to a spot 3 strides from the horses. The snow was pressed into a single broad hollow deeper than any other mark. It watched them, then it left. Father Mikhail joined us and bent his head in a short prayer. When he finished, he straightened and looked at Dmitri. "Do your people have a name for such tracks?" Dmitri hesitated. His eyes moved from the priest to the broken strap, then to the slope. "We have stories," he said. "They speak of something that walks in the high valleys. It does not belong to men or beasts. It keeps hunters away from certain places. If someone ignores the warnings, it follows them." "Stories." Anton forced a short laugh, but it broke halfway through. "We came to draw maps and measure timber. We will not turn back because snow settled oddly in the night." He spoke loud, his tone clipped. It sounded more like an effort to keep his own thoughts in order than anything meant for us. I could not take my eyes from the line of prints. They led away from the camp toward a rise of broken rock. The snow there was smoother, the shapes less clear, but the spacing continued with the same rhythm. Step after step, heading in the direction we planned to travel. "We follow the valley," Sergei said slowly. "Our orders do not mention things that walk in stories. We have provisions for another week, and the horses can still pull. If we turn back now, we lose the effort already spent. And if we continue," Father Mikhail asked, "what then?" "Then we see what is there," Sergei replied. "We keep watch. We set our camp more carefully. We do not move alone." Dmitri's jaw tightened. "This place is marked," he said. "We heard it in the night. We see it in the snow. My people do not cross such signs." "You agreed to guide us," Anton said. "You took the governor's terms. You think he will listen if we say we turn back because of a sound and some tracks?" The tension between them thickened the cold air. I waited for Dmitri to argue, to curse, to refuse outright. Instead, he closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, his gaze had hardened. "I will take you as far as the fork below the main ridge," he said. "Beyond that, I will not lead. If you wish to go further, you will choose your own path." Sergei nodded once. "The fork will give us a view. We can decide there." We broke camp quickly, more silent than usual. Every clink of metal and rustle of canvas seemed too loud against the stillness around us. I checked the sled lashings twice, though nothing had changed since the night before. When I walked past the horses, their breath puffed over my gloves. They turned their heads, eyes wide, ears still pinned forward toward the slope where the tracks disappeared. It was clear they had not forgotten the night. As we resumed the climb, the valley narrowed. The rock walls on either side rose higher, close enough now that I could see veins of darker stone and small ledges buried under wind-packed drifts. The trees had fallen away entirely, leaving only scrub branches locked under ice. The snow underfoot grew firmer, its surface crusted from repeated freezing. The sled runners slid more easily, but the air thinned, and my chest strained with each breath. No one spoke for a long stretch. The only sounds were the rasp of runners, the creak of leather, and our breaths. Each time the path curved, I found myself expecting to see a shape on the slope above us, some pale form against the darker stone moving with slow steps. The ridges stayed empty. Still, the uneasy sense of being observed did not lift. Eventually, Sergei drew level with me. His beard was stiff with frost, and his nose had turned a dull red. "When I was young," he said quietly, "I traveled with a group of trappers farther east. They told tales of a creature in the high passes there. They spoke of long arms, white hair, and eyes that glowed when it turned its head. I thought they used the story to keep me from wandering too far. Now I see these tracks, and I wonder, you never saw it yourself?" I asked. "No," he said, "but we found a camp once where the snow was trampled in wide circles, and a man's pack lay torn apart. No blood, no body, just empty space where he should have been." I looked ahead at Dmitri's back. His steps never faltered. "Did your party continue?" "We did," Sergei answered. "There was no choice in that journey either." We passed a series of shallow hollows where the wind had carved the snow into smooth depressions. In one of them, near the base of the wall, I saw another set of impressions. They were faint, nearly erased by drift, but the pattern struck me at once. Long, wide, evenly spaced. They crossed our path and headed up toward a broken notch in the ridge. I stopped and pointed. "It uses the same routes we use," I said. "Then it is clever," Anton replied from behind. "Or we are predictable." Father Mikhail studied the hollow. "It is not bound by our reasons for travel," he said. "It goes where it wishes." We moved on. Above us, the clouds thickened until the light flattened across the snow, leaving no clear shadows. Depth became harder to judge. More than once, my foot went down farther than expected, and I stumbled until my weight found solid crust again. Each misstep pulled a quiet curse from my lips in a brief flash of anger. The anger never lasted. It drained quickly into the same steady unease that had followed me since the night. Around midday, we reached the fork Dmitri had mentioned. The valley split into two branches, one to the left, broader and smoother, the other to the right, steeper and lined with jagged outcrops. A low rise stood between them. Dmitri led us to its top. From there, we could see deeper into both branches. The left-hand valley extended in a slow curve toward distant slopes. Frost-covered boulders dotted its floor, and a thin line of darker stone suggested a frozen stream. The right-hand branch narrowed quickly into a gorge. Its walls rose higher, and patches of ice clung to them in thick sheets. The wind there carried a faint, steady sound, not a howl, but a dull rumble, as if air moved through unseen hollows. "There," Dmitri said, pointing to the right. "The old stories placed the forbidden ground." "And our orders?" Anton asked. Sergei unfolded the stiff map from his inner coat and weighed it down with his mitten. The inked line traced the main valley and branched faintly toward the area the governor's clerk had circled. The circled mark lay closer to the right-hand gorge than the left. "If we follow the broader branch," Sergei said, "we may miss the region they wish us to record. If we take the gorge, we keep to the planned route." "No one in the town has set foot here," Father Mikhail said. "Their marks on that parchment follow guesswork." "That may be," Sergei replied, "but our pay depends on our effort to match those marks." While they argued, my eyes fixed on a patch of slope beyond the fork. Hard snow draped the rock there, and scattered stones cut its surface. For a moment, I saw nothing unusual. Then a slight contrast caught my attention. Near a narrow ledge, the snow was disturbed in a short line. 3 or 4 deep impressions spaced far apart, ascending toward a higher ridge. They were larger than any step we had seen so far. I touched Dmitri's arm and pointed. He followed my gesture, and his face tightened further. "It travels the gorge," he said. "So we know which way to avoid," Father Mikhail said at once. Anton shook his head. "Or we know which way holds something worth marking," he said. "The crown likes tales of beasts almost as much as they like silver. Bring back reports of a strange creature, and they will open their purse wider next season." "You think this is a chance for fame?" Dmitri said, his voice low. "You do not understand what stalks here." "I understand that turning back now will mark us as cowards," Anton replied. "You can stay here and pray if you wish. I will follow the route we were given." I felt their eyes turn toward me. As the youngest, I had rarely been given weight in decisions. Yet, at that moment, they waited. Perhaps each needed to see where I stood before fixing his own choice in his mind. My throat felt dry, but I forced myself to speak. "If we avoid every sign that unsettles us," I said carefully, "we will never complete any journey. We have come this far. We have food, weapons, and each other. We advanced another day into the gorge. If the signs grow worse, we reconsider. If we turn back now without trying, we carry nothing home but doubt." Sergei studied me for a long moment, then folded the map. "One day more," he said. "No further promise." Dmitri's mouth pressed into a thin line. "I will walk to the rear," he said. "I will watch what follows us." We guided the sleds toward the right-hand branch. The light dimmed as the walls drew closer around us. The distant rumble of wind in the gorge grew louder, a constant undertone beneath our steps. Each pace carried us deeper into that narrowing path where the tracks vanished ahead, leaving only bare snow and stone to hold what waited. The gorge tightened around us until the walls rose so high that the gray sky narrowed to a thin strip overhead. The wind no longer came in gusts. It flowed through the passage in a steady current that tugged at our clothing and numbed our cheeks. The horses lowered their heads and leaned into the traces, their hooves clacking on the firmer crust beneath the powder. The sled runners hissed over the packed surface. Every sound seemed muted, as if the walls absorbed more than they echoed. We continued in this way for an hour, maybe more. My sense of time thinned under the sameness of stone and snow. I kept glancing back at Dmitri, who walked behind the second sled with his spear in hand. His eyes never left the path behind us. At first, I took this as simple caution. Then I noticed how often he paused mid-step, as if listening for something only he could hear. At one point, he raised a gloved hand. We halted. The horses blew hard clouds of breath into the cold air. Anton stepped forward, hand on the butt of his rifle. "What is it?" he asked. Dmitri tilted his head and closed his eyes. I listened too. At first, I heard nothing beyond the wind's low murmur. Then something shifted under it, a faint vibration that passed through the ground in a short, uneven pulse. It was not strong, but it was distinct. It came from somewhere ahead, deeper in the gorge. "Rockfall," Sergei whispered. "No," Dmitri said. "Something moving on the far slope." "How far?" I asked. He opened his eyes. "Far enough that we cannot see it. Near enough that it feels like the ground." Anton scanned the cliffs on either side. "It knows we are here," he said. Father Mikhail's breath shuddered. "Everything knows we are here. A place like this hears every step." "That is not what I meant," Anton replied, though he did not argue further. We waited another moment, listening for a second tremor. None came. Whatever had moved, it had settled again. Dmitri lowered his hand, but he did not look reassured. He kept closer to the sled as we resumed. The gorge curved a little to the left, and new details appeared that broke the monotony. The first was a line of broken stones near the base of the right wall. They were bare of snow, as though something had swept across them recently. The second was a cluster of dark shapes farther on. As we drew closer, the shapes resolved into old wooden stakes, half buried under ice. Some still held fragments of rope that stiffened in the cold. The wood was weathered to a gray that blended with the stone. "Old camp," Anton said. "Too cold for any camp to last," Sergei answered. He crouched near one of the stakes and brushed away the crusted snow. "Look at the grain. It split long ago. Years, maybe decades. Why set the stakes here?" I asked. Dmitri approached one and ran his hand along its length. "Not for tents," he said. "Too few for a shelter. These marked a boundary. Someone wanted to warn travelers." "Warn them of what?" Anton asked. Dmitri gestured toward the narrowing gorge. "Of what waited ahead." His tone carried no drama. It was matter of fact, which made it more unsettling. Father Mikhail stepped back from the stakes, his expression tight. "We should pray. We should keep moving," Anton said. "Prayer will not widen the gorge or drive off whatever left those prints." "No," the priest answered quietly, "but it may steady our hands." We pressed on. The old stakes became less frequent until they vanished entirely. The gorge narrowed further. The walls leaned inward in places, and the path wound between uneven drifts that hid deeper pockets of snow. When the wind shifted, it carried a sharp mineral smell from somewhere ahead, mixed with something faintly organic, an odor I could not name, dry and cold at the same time. The next sign came without warning. Dmitri's shout cut through the air sharp enough to freeze all of us mid-step. He pointed to the slope above. At first, I saw nothing. Then movement touched the edge of my vision. A pale shape sliding behind an outcrop far up the right wall. Not a full body, only a glimpse. A patch of white fur moving with controlled speed before vanishing into a hollow. Anton raised his rifle. "There," he said through his teeth. "Did you see it?" "I saw something," Sergei said. "Not enough to name." "I saw fur," Anton insisted. "White long." Father Mikhail lowered his head. "We must turn back," he said. "This is no simple animal." Dmitri kept his gaze fixed on the ridge. "It watches us," he said. "It chooses when to show itself." "Then it wants us to see it," Anton replied. "No," Dmitri said. "It wants to see how we react." That thought dug into me more than the sight itself. I imagined eyes following us from each ledge and shadowed hollow, calculating our pace, our direction, our choices. "We cannot reverse the sleds in this passage," Sergei said. "There is no room to turn them. We would have to backtrack a long distance. Then we go forward until we find a place wide enough." I said before anyone else could speak. My voice came out thinner than I intended, but the logic held. "This gorge must open somewhere. Or narrow further," Father Mikhail whispered. Anton lifted his rifle higher. "If it attacks, we shoot," he said. "We hold our ground." "It does not attack for sport," Dmitri said. "It attacks when threatened or cornered." "Then we do not corner it," Sergei said. We keep moving. We advanced with tighter formation. Anton walked slightly ahead with his rifle ready. Sergei guided the lead sled. I walked on the left, eyes moving constantly over the walls. The priest stayed behind me, holding his wooden cross under his coat. Dmitri remained at the rear, spear angled toward the trail behind. Another hour passed like this. The sighting had sharpened every sense. Even the wind felt different. Each shift in pressure made me think of movement above. My legs ached from walking in a half crouch, ready to react. When the path widened a little, my relief lasted only a moment before I noticed what caused it. The snow on the left side sloped into a shallow depression that stretched several paces. At its center lay a cluster of broken branches, twisted and splintered. Their ends were sharp, not gnawed. The ground around them was disturbed in long scratches that cut into the crust. Something fell here, Sergei said, or was dropped. Dmitri approached the branches and touched one. These came from trees lower in the valley, he said. None grow here. Something carried them up and broke them. For shelter, I asked. For nesting, Anton suggested. Dmitri shook his head. Not nesting. Marking. This is a sign. It leaves these where it wants no one to pass. We already passed, Anton said. Yes, Dmitri answered. And it knows. The wind blew harder for a moment, carrying the mineral scent again. This time it mixed with another odor, faint, musky, almost metallic. It clung to the air even after the gust faded. We are close, Dmitri said. To what? I asked. He looked down the gorge. To its ground. The passage curved again, and the walls opened suddenly into a wider basin hemmed by steep ridges. The floor was uneven, broken by mounds of wind-packed snow and scattered boulders. At the far end of the basin stood a cleft between two massive stones, narrow and dark. The wind seemed to funnel through that opening, carrying the same dull rumble we had heard earlier. The horses balked. They planted their hooves and refused to step forward. Sergei tried coaxing them, but their legs locked. Their eyes rolled with fear. We stop here, he said. Forcing them will break them. I scanned the basin. The snow was marked in several places by impressions similar to the ones near our camp, but deeper and more defined. Some were fresh, others had begun to crust over. They formed no clear trail. They were scattered across the basin as if something had walked here many times, choosing a different path each time. Anton drew a long breath. This is where it lives, he said. Father Mikhail tightened his grip on his cross. We should leave an offering, he said. Something to show we mean no harm. It will not understand offerings, Dmitri said. Only trespass. Then what do we do? I asked. Dmitri looked at the cleft between the stones, then at the tracks around us. We cannot go forward, he said. We cannot turn the sleds. We cannot stay here long. It knows we are in its basin. It will return. A shiver passed down my spine. The basin lay open above, offering dozens of vantage points from which something could watch unseen. We need higher ground, Sergei said. Someplace we can defend if it comes. Defend against what we do not understand. Father Mikhail asked. We understand enough, Anton said. It is big, it is fast, and it does not want us here. We climb that slope, Sergei said, pointing to a rise near the eastern ridge. It has solid stone under the snow. The sleds cannot go, but we can carry what we need for a short hold. We abandon the sleds, I asked. Only briefly, Sergei said. We return it to them once we learn its intentions. Dmitri did not argue. That confirmed more than his words ever had. If he believed the basin was dangerous enough to leave our provisions below, then we were already at the edge of whatever boundary the stakes had been meant to mark. We gathered what we could carry, rifles, blankets, tinderbox, some dried meat, and began climbing the slope. The snow was thin here, scraped down by past winds. The stone beneath was steep, but not treacherous. My legs burned, and each breath felt like a stab in my chest. Still, I climbed faster than I thought I could. The thought of being caught in the basin pushed me upward. Halfway to the ridge, I glanced back. From this height, the basin spread below us in a white expanse broken by dark stone. The sleds looked small. The wind carried another gust, and the faint metallic odor returned. Then I saw it. On the far ridge, near a cluster of boulders, a tall shape stood motionless. White fur blended with the snow, but its outline was clear. Broad shoulders, long arms, a head set low and forward. It stood without shifting. It faced us. My breath caught. There, I whispered. The others followed my gaze. No one spoke. Even Anton lowered his rifle slowly, as if sudden movement might provoke it. The creature did not move. I only watched it. Watching felt worse than chasing. Watching meant waiting, calculating. We reached the ridge, Dmitri said quietly. Do not run. Do not look back again. I obeyed, but I felt its presence on my back with every step, heavy and constant, as we climbed toward a place that suddenly felt less like shelter and more like an edge with no good choices on either side. We reached the ridge with our breath running short and our hands stiff around the things we carried. The stone flattened into a narrow shelf that overlooked the basin. The wind struck us harder there, funneling over the ridge and carrying a cold that pressed through every layer of clothing. Still, the height allowed us distance from the open ground below. Anton set his rifle down and crouched behind a boulder. Sergei lowered his pack and knelt to study the slope beneath us. Father Mikhail leaned against the stone and murmured a prayer too soft for me to hear. Dmitri took the farthest position, closest to the drop, his spear held upright. His eyes searched the opposite ridge where we had seen the figure. It was gone. I looked across the basin twice, then a third time, scanning each shadow, each rise of snow. Nothing moved. The cluster of boulders stood empty. The wind sliced between them without resistance. Where is it? Anton asked. Do not search for it, Dmitri said. It will show itself when it chooses. That is exactly the problem, Anton replied, his jaw tightening. It watches, then it disappears. It walks near the camp, then leaves no more sound. Everything it does puts us on edge and gives it the advantage. Sergei sat back on his heels and rubbed his hands together for warmth. Creatures that survive in lands like these learn patience, he said. It has seen men before. It knows how we react. I do not care how long it has watched others, Anton said. I want to know what it wants from us. It wants nothing, Dmitri said. It wants us gone. The wind flattened his words. They reached me with a blunt certainty that settled in my chest. We huddled behind the stones, doing our best to shield ourselves from the cold. For a long time, we said nothing. The basin lay quiet beneath us, too quiet. Even the wind sounded muted once it passed the ridge. My hands trembled from the cold and strain. I pressed them under my coat. In the stillness, my mind moved through pieces of memory. The first sound in the night, the prints near the horses, the glimpse of white fur behind the outcrop. All separate at the time, but together they formed a line that pointed here. To this basin, this ridge, this moment. We cannot stay long, Sergei finally said. The cold will drain us. If it approaches, we need the strength to act. We return to the sleds, I asked. Not yet, he said. We watch to see if it moves again. If we step back too soon, we walk straight into its path. So we wait for it to make the first move, Anton muttered. If it wished to attack, it could have done so in the gorge, Sergei said. It has chosen not to. That means something. To you, Anton replied. Not to me. I leaned forward, peering down the slope. The tracks in the basin were clearer from above, scattered but deep, each one wide and long. They crossed one another in tangled paths. I tried following one line with my eyes, but it disappeared under wind-carved ridges only to reappear farther on. The creature did not walk a single route. It moved with intention known only to itself. After several minutes, Dmitri lifted a hand. Look, he said. A small movement broke the stillness. On the far left side of the basin, near a jet of stone, snow drifted downward in a slow, loose spill. At first, I thought the wind had dislodged it. Then a shape emerged behind it, white against white, but distinct enough. It moved with a forward-leaning posture, stepping with controlled weight. It crossed the basin at an angle, heading toward the cleft between the two large stones. Its arms hung low. Its stride was long but unhurried. It did not look toward us. It is returning to the cleft, Dmitri said. Then that cleft is its shelter, Sergei said. Anton gripped his rifle. And yet we are the ones who hide. Father Mikhail drew a breath that shook. Do not provoke it. It has allowed us this ridge. Let it remain so. We watched in silence. The creature reached the cleft and paused at the entrance. It turned slightly, giving us a brief view of its profile. Broad torso, thick fur, a head held forward as if listening to vibrations only it understood. For a heartbeat, I thought it might look up. Instead, it stepped inside and vanished into the darkness between the stones. The basin returned to stillness. We cannot remain here, Sergei said at last. But we cannot approach the cleft either. That is its ground. We leave the valley, Father Mikhail said. We have seen enough. Anton shook his head. We return with nothing but a story that will not satisfy the governor. It will only make us look incompetent. We are lucky to still breathe, the priest replied. No map is worth more than breath. We must decide quickly, Dmitri said. It entered its shelter. It may stay or it may emerge again. If we delay, we lose the chance to retreat with daylight. The tension inside me pulled tight. I wanted to leave. Everything in this basin told us we did not belong. But I also understood Anton's fear. Not fear of the creature, but fear of failure. A winter expedition that returns without a single measure written is a failure in the governor's eyes. That failure would fall hardest on me, yet survival mattered more. We retreat, I said. We leave now. If we attempt to map this place, we risk more than we can justify. Anton stared at me. His expression shifted through frustration, disbelief, and something like resignation. You would give up everything we came for, he said. We came for information, I answered. We have learned something. We know a creature guards this valley. That alone is worth reporting. We cannot push further without inviting disaster. Sergei nodded. The boy is right. We will go back. Father Mikhail murmured another prayer under his breath. Dmitri looked relieved for the first time that day. Anton looked at each of us, then lowered his gaze. Fine, he said, but if it follows, I will not hesitate. No one expects you to, Sergei said. We gathered our packs and descended the slope with deliberate steps. Each footfall sent small bursts of snow sliding down. The wind felt sharper as we neared the basin floor. The sleds waited below like abandoned relics, half buried by drifting powder. As we approached, I glanced at the cleft. It remained dark and still. The entrance looked too narrow for something so large to fit through, but I had seen it enter with my own eyes. We dug out the sleds and prepared the horses. They trembled as we harnessed them, but they did not bolt. The sky darkened as cloud cover thickened, pressing a dim bluish light over the basin. We move quickly, Sergei said, into the gorge before it returns. We set off, guiding the sleds toward the narrow passage that led back the way we came. The basin felt wider now, emptier, yet somehow more oppressive. The tracks beneath the snow seemed to shift in the corner of my eye, though I knew it was only the wind passing. Halfway across, a deep crack echoed through the air. We froze. The horses reared in panic. Snow slid off the ridge above us, scattering down the slope. It was not a cry. It was not the tremor from before. It was a sharp, resonant sound that came from stones splitting or shifting under enormous force. Move, Dmitri shouted. We hurried forward. The gorge entrance lay only a short distance ahead. Then another crack rang out, closer, deeper. I looked over my shoulder. The creature stood at the edge of the cleft. Its head was lowered. Its chest expanded with heavy breaths that sent faint vapor into the air. It had emerged without a sound. Its gaze fixed directly on us this time. The distance between us was not far at all. Anton raised his rifle. Don't fire, Sergei said. Don't provoke. The creature stepped forward onto the basin floor. Each stride closed the ground faster than I expected. It was not running. It was simply moving with purpose, covering vast distances with each step. We cannot outrun it, Father Mikhail whispered. Keep the sleds moving, Sergei said. Do not stop. Do not separate. The creature's pace did not quicken, but its presence filled the basin in a way that made the air seem thinner. My heart was hammered. My legs moved without thought. The gorge entrance grew closer. Another crack sounded, not stone this time. Ice broke somewhere behind us. The creature halted and turned its head slightly, as if listening to something deeper within the valley. For a fleeting moment, it hesitated. Go, Dmitri shouted. While it chooses. We pushed forward with every remaining ounce of strength. The gorge swallowed us in its narrow stone throat. I did not look back again. Not until the walls widened enough for us to breathe without feeling exposed. Only then did I risk a glance. The basin lay behind us, empty. The creature had not followed. Not yet. We did not speak until the gorge walls rose fully around us again. The dim light pressed into the passage, dull and cold. The horses slowed to a nervous walk, still glancing back as if expecting the creature to appear at any moment. My breath came hard, not from exertion alone, but from the shock that still pulsed in my chest. The cold inside the gorge felt different now, more intrusive, as if something unseen followed just outside our reach. Sergei moved ahead to steady the lead horse. Easy, he murmured. It stopped. It did not chase. It stopped because something else called it, Dmitri said. His voice carried an edge that unsettled me. Did you not hear the last crack? That was deeper than stone falling. That was the valley speaking to it. We cannot know that, Anton said. though his voice held little conviction. Dmitri did not answer. We pressed on at a faster pace. The gorge twisted in slow bends, hiding both sky and distance. The horses slipped twice, and Anton muttered curses each time he had to help right the second sled. I kept glancing back along the narrow track behind us. Every shadow looked like it might shift. At one bend, the wind fell silent for a brief moment. The quiet dropped so suddenly that it made my skin tighten. Even the horses stopped breathing for an instant. Then a faint low sound traveled through the stone. Long, distant, and impossible to measure. It was not the cry from the night before. It was deeper, heavier, less a call than a force moving through an unseen place. Dmitri stopped walking. "It is not alone," he said. Anton shot him a glare. "Enough with these claims. One creature is trouble enough. Do not invent more." "Quiet," Sergei said sharply. "Listen." The stone carried another faint tremor, this one shorter, then nothing. Wind returned, filling the silence, but the echo lingered inside me. We resumed moving. Step by step, the gorge widened. The walls rose less steeply. Snow fell in loose drifts again rather than tight wind-sculpted curves. The signs of the valley's strange boundary seemed to thin. Even the horses walked with less tension in their stride. I let out a slow breath. We were not safe, but we were farther from the basin. Distance mattered. "How far until we reach the fork?" I asked. "Another hour," Sergei said. "If the weather holds." "It will not hold," Dmitri said. "The valley grows uneasy." "You speak as if the valley feels," Anton snapped. "I speak as my people do," Dmitri replied calmly. "We observe patterns. We respect what we do not understand." Anton opened his mouth to argue further, then closed it again. His rifle hung across his back, strap wet with melted frost. I could tell he wanted to shoulder it again. We advanced in silence. The gorge straightened, giving us a long view ahead. I felt a loosening in my chest when I saw the path stretch empty toward a distant curve. The absence of threat felt like breathing after holding my lungs tight too long. But it ended quickly. Halfway down that long straight stretch, we found the next sign. Tracks, fresh ones, crossed the gorge ahead of us, cutting from the left wall to the right. They were deeper than the prints near camp, spaced farther apart and more sharply defined. Melt had not touched their edges. Snow had not drifted over them. They were recent, very recent. Sergei stopped at the first of them and knelt down. "These were made within minutes," he said. "The wind has not softened them." "It passed here while we were on the ridge," I said quietly. "No," Dmitri said. "It passed while we fled the basin." Anton's fists curled. "Then why did it not appear behind us? Why cross in front then vanish again?" "Because it moves where we cannot see," Dmitri said. "It knows every path above us. It chooses its ground faster than we choose ours." Father Mikhail stared at the tracks with a look that bordered on dread. "We cannot escape something that moves in silence," he said. "Not in land like this." "We do not need to escape forever," Sergei replied. "We only need to reach safer ground. Once we clear these walls, we can put more distance between us." "We should hurry," I said. We followed the gorge path again, stepping around the fresh prints. Every few minutes, I looked back at them, half expecting a new set to appear. The stone passage bent left, then right. The air felt colder each time the wind funneled through a tight turn. At one narrow section, the horses abruptly halted. They refused to take another step forward and pressed close together as if trying to fuse into one shape. Anton tugged at their reins, swearing under his breath. "Hold," Sergei said. Dmitri stepped past us and knelt near the path ahead. He brushed away loose snow with his hand. Beneath the shallow layer, the crust bore fresh scratches. Long, deep gouges in the hard surface, as if something heavy had passed with its hands or claws dragging lightly. "It touched the ground here," Dmitri said. "Not out of weakness, out of curiosity." "Curiosity," Anton spat the word. "You speak like a man who knows its thoughts." "I know enough to understand its habits," Dmitri replied. "It examines new things in its territory. We are new." Father Mikhail crossed himself. His voice shook. "We must leave this gorge." "We will," Sergei said firmly. "We are almost back to the fork." But his voice held something new. Doubt. We continued. The path widened slowly as we approached the point where the gorge would open again. The horses sensed it before we did. Their pace quickened and their ears lifted. Even they recognized escape. Then the wind dropped again. This time it did not return right away. The silence inside the gorge tightened like a binding. My breath sounded too loud. My boots pressed too clearly into the snow. No gust, no whisper, not even the soft rumble we had grown used to. Nothing. We stay together, Sergei said. The fork lay only a short distance ahead. We reached the last bend, and then from high above us, a sharp sound broke the silence. A stone clattered down the gorge wall and struck the path near the second sled. It bounced once, twice, then rolled to a stop. I looked up. Something moved between two jagged rocks near the ridge above. A shape, not fully visible, shifted its weight and disappeared behind a rise. It is above us, Anton whispered. Keep moving, Sergei said. Do not let it trap us in this bend. We advanced again, but now my eyes darted constantly between the walls and the path ahead. The sense of being herded, guided, grew stronger with every step. As we neared the broadening exit of the gorge, another sound reached us. Not a call, not a tremor, a steady rhythmic thud. Slow, measured, heavy, coming from behind. I turned. At first, I saw only the narrowing passage behind us. Then a shape stepped into view from around the last bend. The creature stood there, its fur blown lightly by the faint breeze. Its shoulders filled the space between the walls more than I remembered. Its arms hung at its sides, motionless. Snow clung to its coat in patches. Its breath formed low clouds that drifted forward and dissolved. Its eyes, dark, steady, unblinking, held us all in place. Anton raised his rifle. No, Sergei said sharply. If you fire, we all die. The creature took one more step forward, not rushing, not charging, simply advancing with a patience that terrified me more than any sudden attack. We cannot outrun it, Father Mikhail whispered. We do not run, Dmitri said. We move backward slowly. Do not turn. Do not shout. Do not point the rifle at its face. Anton swallowed hard, but lowered the barrel. Step by step, we retreated. The horses trembled, but followed the pull of the reins. The creature watched us without shifting its gaze. It stopped when we reached the wider part of the gorge. It stood still, utterly still. We are at its boundary, Dmitri said. It is telling us to leave. We are leaving, Sergei said, but not fast enough. The creature took one more step forward. It was warning us, a final one. My pulse hammered so hard I could feel it in my fingers. My legs shook, yet I kept moving backward, one controlled step at a time. Then we crossed the invisible line that separated the narrow gorge from the broader valley path, and the creature stopped. It did not follow. It only stood there in the shadow of the closing walls, its breath drifting like a slow, steady engine beneath its broad chest. Anton exhaled shakily. It won't come out. No, Dmitri said. It will not leave its ground unless provoked. We are leaving its ground. The creature remained still for a long moment. Then it turned without hurry and disappeared back into the bend from which it had come. The silence that followed felt different, emptier, but still heavy. We did not speak until Sergei finally said, "We keep moving as far from this place as our legs will take us before night." We obeyed without argument, and as we left the gorge behind, I kept expecting to see another shape on a ridge or another set of tracks crossing our path, but nothing followed. We pushed ourselves for hours, putting as much distance as we could between our retreat and the gorge. The valley widened again, and the mountains pulled back into lines of deep-cut slopes and scattered trees. The air felt different, less heavy, less watchful, but none of us dared ease our pace. Even the horses kept a tense rhythm, their ears flicking at shadows that no longer held anything but wind. By the time the light dimmed, we reached a cluster of low pines near the base of a ridge. Their branches bowed under thick snow. The place offered some shelter from the growing cold. Sergei called a halt. None of us truly wanted to stop, but our legs had begun to fail beneath us, and the horses could not continue without rest. We set the sleds in a rough half-circle and tied the animals between the pines. They shivered less here, hidden from the wind, but their breath still came shallow. Their eyes never left the direction we had come. We made a small fire using dry needles and thin branches beneath the trees. The flame grew slowly, but once it caught, the warmth reached our hands and faces. It did not comfort me. It only reminded me how far from safety we still were. Anton lowered himself onto the sled runner and held his hands near the fire. His fingers shook. "We were close," he said quietly. "Too close. If it had taken one more step." "It didn't," Sergei said. "That is all that matters now." "It didn't because we left its ground," I said. Dmitri was right. Dmitri sat a little apart from us, his back against a pine trunk. His spear lay across his lap. Snow still clung to the fur of his coat. He stared toward the shadows in the valley, watching for movement. Did it spare us? Father Mikhail asked. His voice sounded tired in a way I had not heard before. Or did it decide we were not worth the chase? It chose not to kill us, Dmitri said without turning. Creatures that kill do so quickly when threatened. It only showed its size, its strength, and its claim. That was enough. Anton shook his head. It is an animal. You speak as if it's the reason. It survives, Dmitri said. Survival teaches its own kind of thought. We fell silent. The fire crackled softly, and the light shifted across our faces. My legs throbbed with exhaustion, and each breath made my ribs ache, but my mind refused rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the creature standing at the bend, its breath drifting, its eyes locked on us without a flicker of emotion. What now? I asked. We cannot return home with empty papers. We return home alive, Sergei said. That is enough. The governor will disagree, I said. Let me speak to him, Sergei replied. He has known me for many years. He will hear the truth. Anton stared into the fire. If he dismisses us, he said, we gain only a story, nothing else. Not a story, I said. A warning. Dmitri finally looked at us. His eyes were hollow with fatigue, but clear. There are places in these lands where men do not belong, he said. That valley is one of them. Leave it to the creature. Leave it to the mountains. The wind rustled the pine branches above us. Snow drifted in slow flakes. It was peaceful, but only on the surface. Beneath it lingered a tension, faint but present, like something in the valley still watched from a great distance. We took turns keeping watch. I did not sleep long. Each time I drifted toward rest, some small sound, snow settling, branches creaking, pulled me back. When my turn came, I stood near the edge of the trees with a blanket around my shoulders, rifle slung across my back. The valley stretched pale and still beneath the rising moon. No movement touched the snow. No shape broke the ridges. Yet the silence carried a weight. The creature had let us go, but not because it feared us, because we were no longer a concern. Dawn came slowly, gray and colorless. We broke camp with numb fingers. The horses were stiff, but ready. None of us spoke until the valley floor spread wider, and the terrain took on familiar landmarks. Rock outcrops we had passed days before, a frozen stream marked by our earlier crossing. Only then did the tension in our chests start to loosen. Even so, we did not trust our relief. We kept a brisk pace, and every one of us glanced back more than once. By midday, the valley had opened enough that the old hunter trail appeared again beneath the snow's surface. It led toward the cabins of the lower range, where smoke rose in faint ribbons from chimneys half buried in drifts. When the first cabin came into view, Sergei exhaled long and slow. We made it, he said. Father Mikhail lowered his head in silent thanks. Anton rubbed his hands over his face. The creature will not come this far, he said as if reassuring himself more than any of us. Dmitri remained quiet. We approached the cabin. A hunter stepped out, fur hat pulled low, axe in hand. He stared at us with surprise, then something like concern. You returned quickly, he said. The valley turned you back. Sergei nodded. We reached the gorge. We saw what walks there. The hunter's expression hardened. He stepped closer and lowered his voice. Some men do not return from that place. You should count yourselves fortunate. We do, Sergei said. Anton looked away, jaw tight. I realized then fortune had nothing to do with it. Something else had decided our fate. Inside the cabin, the stove glowed with hot coals. The heat stung my face, but I welcomed it. Snow melted into my boots, soaking my socks. We sat around the small table with bowls of broth the hunter prepared. The warmth filled my stomach, but did little to push out the cold memory that clung to me. The hunter watched us closely. Tell me what you saw. Sergei glanced at the rest of us, then spoke in a quiet tone. A creature of great size, covered in white fur. It watched us, followed us, and drove us from its valley. The hunter nodded slowly. I have heard these tales since childhood. My grandfather said, the creature keeps its land guarded. Not all who wander into its basin are warned out. Some are taken. Father Mikhail made the sign of the cross. Anton looked at the floor. I stared into my bowl. The broth swirled with faint ripples from my trembling hand. Do not speak of it loudly, the hunter said. Names have power in places like that. We will not return, Sergei said, nor should anyone. You have the right idea, the hunter replied. Those mountains do not yield to maps. We slept in the cabin that night, deep, dreamless sleep that came only after exhaustion pushed fear aside. The next day, we continued toward the settlement. Days later, we walked through its gates with windburned faces, and a silence none of us could shake. The governor listened with narrowed eyes when Sergei delivered the account. He did not believe every word, but he believed enough. He did not send anyone back into the gorge that winter. He did not ask us to return. In time, Anton sought other work far from the northern ranges. Father Mikhail left the province entirely. Sergei remained a hunter until age bent his back. Dmitri returned to his people and refused again to guide for the crown. As for me, I wrote down what we had seen. Not the maps, not the measurements. Those were useless. I wrote the truth as plainly as the valley had shown it. Some years later, when I passed near the range again, I saw no new tracks leading toward that forbidden gorge. The valley stood untouched, and I knew why. Some places are not meant for maps or stories beyond warnings whispered in small cabins during winter storms. Some places belong to the silence and to whatever watches from within it. Our group was spared not because we were brave or clever or worthy. We were spared because the creature allowed us to leave. And that knowledge has never left me.